We have one announcement for the weekend of October 10th and 11th. PSR, our program for students of the parish who attend public schools, begun this past week. Any families seeking reconciliation, First Communion, and/or confirmation this year who are not in a Catholic school are still able to get in, but that deadline will be soon approaching. Registration and calendar of events forms are available for those who wish. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus again in reply spoke to the chief priests and the elders of the people in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. He dispatched his servants to summon the invited guests to the feast, but they refused to come. A second time he sent other servants, saying, 'Tell those invited, behold, I have prepared my banquet. My calves and fattened cattle are killed, and everything is ready. Come to the feast.' Some ignored the invitation and went away, one to his farm, another to his business. The rest laid hold of his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged and sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The feast is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy to come. Go out, therefore, into the main roads and invite to the feast whomever you find.' The servants went out into the streets and gathered all they found, bad and good alike, and the hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to meet the guests, he saw a man there not dressed in a wedding garment. The king said to him, 'My friend, how is it that you come in here without a wedding garment?' But he was reduced to silence. Then the king said to his attendants, 'Bind his hand and feet, and cast him into the darkness outside, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Many are invited, but few are chosen.'" The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. We never know for sure who is a true believer. For much of church history, we thought we could know this for sure, and the answer was simple. True believers were those who belonged to the church. In other words, if you were baptized, attended services, and submitted to the Pope, you were by necessity a true believer. This mindset was challenged by the Protestant reformers of the 16th century, who convincingly taught that exterior membership in the church doesn't necessarily mean that one is interiorly a believer. In fact, they came up with this idea as a result of seeing so many Christians, clergy and laity alike, living double lives and not being faithful to God. I think it is now an established fact in Christian theology that we never know for sure who a true believer is. Our gospel today highlights the fact that true believers are hard to identify. They are a shifting and a fluid group. As we heard in the parable, the king sent his servants out to invite guests to his son's wedding feast not once, not twice, but 3 times. It took 3 times to get it right, and even then there was still a problem with one of the guests. The point is that just because someone is invited doesn't mean that they will actually show up. Just because someone is externally a believer doesn't mean they are internally really so. In Jesus' own words, many are invited, but few are chosen. There's a certain harshness to Jesus' parable today that can offend us. We like to think that all those who are called are also chosen, including ourselves. The Lutheran theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer stated it just as harshly. In his book, The Cost of Discipleship, he wrote, "It is our opinion that if Jesus himself and Jesus alone with his word were here among us in our preaching, then quite a different set of people would hear the word, and quite a different set of people would turn away from it. From his perspective, it is very humbling to realize that if Jesus himself were here today, perhaps our congregations would look different. Just because we are here now or were born into the church does not guarantee that we are actually chosen. And so our point for our liturgy this weekend is, we do not know who the true believers are. Only God does. I say all of this because there is a positive side. It suggests to us that there are still good people out in the world who are willing to hear Jesus. There are people who have not yet been invited, but will be invited at some point and quite possibly be chosen. In fact, it was the guests invited the third and final time in the parable that had the most chosen people in their midst. This should give us reason to hope. As we continue with this Mass, let us leave aside the question of who is and who isn't a true believer. We never can know that. Instead, let us ask ourselves the question Bonhoeffer never tired of asking himself throughout his life. Who is Jesus Christ today?